There was something electric in the air during the 1970s. A perfect storm of creativity, rebellion, and pure automotive madness. Car designers weren't just thinking outside the box. They were throwing the box out the window and designing vehicles that looked like they'd rolled straight out of a sci-fi movie. Picture this: gas shortages, environmental concerns, and a generation that refused to play by the old rules. The result? Cars that were weird, wonderful, and sometimes downright wacky. From three-wheelers that tipped over if you looked at them wrong, to vehicles that looked more like spacecrafts than automobiles, the 70s gave us cars that made people stop dead in their tracks. Today, we're cruising through 20 of the most jaw-dropping, head-scratching, and absolutely unforgettable cars that shocked the world in the 1970s. Buckle up. Literally, these were simpler times for seatbelts. And let's take a ride down the most colorful car lanes of automotive history. Don't forget to subscribe if you're ready for this wild ride through the decade that gave us everything outrageous. AMC Pacer. The AMC Pacer wasn't just a car, it was a fishbowl on wheels. Picture yourself sitting in what felt like a giant glass bubble, with more window space than a suburban house. AMC called it the wide small car. And boy, were they right. At 77 inches wide, the same as a full-size sedan, but only 171 inches long, it looked like someone had taken a regular car and squished it. Those wraparound windows gave you a view of everything. And I mean everything. Your neighbors could practically see what you had for breakfast through that massive windshield. The doors were different sizes too. The passenger door was longer than the driver's door, supposedly to help people get in the back easier. But let's be honest, with all that glass, it was like driving naked. The Pacer was supposed to be the car of the future, with its aerodynamic design and cab-forward styling. Instead, it became the car that ate gas like a teenager eats pizza. Remember the scene from Wayne's World where the Pacer shoots flames? That wasn't too far from reality for some owners. Tell us in the comments, would you brave a road trip in a fishbowl car? Or would you need tinted windows just to feel human again? Ford Pinto. The Ford Pinto. Now there's a name that brings back memories, and not all of them good. This little car was Ford's answer to the compact car craze, and for many families, it was their ticket to affordable transportation. With its rounded rear end and perky look, the Pinto was actually pretty cute, like an eager puppy ready for adventure. But here's where things got complicated. The Pinto had a reputation for being, shall we say, explosive in rear-end collisions. It wasn't uncommon to see Pinto owners parking with their rear ends against walls, just in case. Despite all the controversy, millions of Americans drove these little cars daily, and many have fond memories of their first Pinto, that first taste of freedom on four wheels. You'd see them everywhere in the 70s. College campuses, suburbia, grocery store parking lots. They came in wild colors like anti-establishment and Freudian guilt, because even Ford knew this car was therapy on wheels. And you know what? For all its quirks, the Pinto represented something beautiful about the 70s. Optimism, affordability, and the belief that anyone could own a piece of the American dream, even if it came with a few asterisks in the owner's manual. Triumph TR7. The shape of things to come. That was Triumph's bold claim for the TR7, and they weren't wrong. This car looked like a door wedge someone had gifted racing stripes to. With its ultra-low profile and aggressive angles, the TR7 was British automotive rebellion in fiberglass and chrome. The TR7 was different from its classic British roadster siblings. While MGs and Jaguars curved gracefully like a T-service, the TR7 was all sharp edges and attitude. It looked fast standing still, like a sports car that had been folded into origami. The pop-up headlights made it wink at you as it passed, probably because it was laughing at all the confused looks it got. But here's the thing about the TR7. It divided opinions faster than pineapple on pizza. You either loved its wedge-tastic design or thought it looked like a cheese grater on wheels. Those brave enough to drive one felt like they were piloting a time machine, zooming through neighborhoods in something that clearly didn't belong in their decade. Was it beautiful or bizarre? The answer was usually yes. Bricklin SV-1. Malcolm Bricklin had a dream: to build a car that couldn't be crashed and couldn't be stolen. The result was the Bricklin SV-1, a gull-winged sports car that looked like Batman's weekend ride. Those upward opening doors weren't just for show. They were the car's signature move, making every entrance feel like a grand reveal. Only about 2,800 SV-1s were ever made, which means seeing one was rarer than finding a unicorn in your driveway. The car came in only 5 colors, all safety colors, mind you, because Bricklin was serious about making a safe sports car. The body panels were made of fiberglass with integrated bumpers, which was revolutionary for the time. The SV-1 was supposed to be the safest production car ever built, with a built-in roll cage, side impact beams, and energy-absorbing front and rear ends. But those gull-wing doors, sometimes they wouldn't open at all, trapping drivers like well-dressed sardines. Despite, or maybe because of, its quirks, the SV-1 remains one of the most memorable cars of the 70s. A beautiful, bizarre dream on wheels that came true for just a few fortunate souls. Lancia Stratos. The Lancia Stratos wasn't just a car. It was a rally weapon that accidentally had road-legal status. With a body so low you could practically tie your shoes while sitting on the roof, the Stratos looked like it had been designed by someone who'd only heard cars described in a fever dream. Picture this: a wedge-shaped spaceship that someone had attached wheels to, painted in the most outrageous colors imaginable: orange, green, yellow. The Stratos didn't believe in subtlety. Those tiny windows made you feel like you were looking out through a mail slot, but nobody cared because you looked absolutely spectacular doing it. The engine was stuffed right behind your head, thanks to Ferrari, who supplied the V6, which meant you could actually feel the power rumbling through your entire body. Starting it up was like waking a mechanical dragon, all roar and attitude. Sure, getting in required the flexibility of a yoga instructor, and getting out looked like a comedy routine. But those who drove the Stratos knew they were piloting automotive artwork. It was so outrageous that even other sports car owners would stop and stare, wondering if they'd just seen a car or a UFO that forgot to fly away. Citroen DS. The Citroen DS had been shocking people since the 1950s, but in the 70s, it was still turning heads like a model at a fashion show. This French beauty looked like it had been designed by someone who'd seen the future and decided to build it early. With its sleek, aerodynamic body and that distinctive turned-up nose, the DS was unmistakably alien in the best possible way. But the real magic was in how it moved. The DS had hydraulic suspension that let it rise and fall like a cat stretching after a nap. Watching one lift itself off the ground when you started it was pure theater. One moment it's sitting low and mysterious. The next, it's gracefully rising to driving height like a mechanical swan. French style was something else in the 70s, and the DS was the ambassador. Inside, the single-spoke steering wheel looked more like a piece of modern art than a car part, and the seats were as comfortable as your favorite armchair. The car actually leaned into turns instead of fighting them, making every corner feel like a dance. Even in America, where it was rare as hen's teeth, the DS made believers out of skeptics. It proved that sometimes being strange was just another word for being ahead of your time. If you're loving these automotive time capsules, give us a like and hit that subscribe button. Trust us, the weird, wonderful journey is just getting started. Matra Bagheera. The Matra Bagheera was France's answer to the question, what if we made a sports car for 3 people? This wasn't your typical 2+2 setup. This was 3 full-size seats across, like a sports car that doubled as a very fast couch. Imagine explaining this to your friends. Yeah, I've got a sports car, and we can all sit up front together. The Bagheera's unique 3 abreast seating meant nobody got stuck in the back, though the person in the middle got to play awkward third wheel all the way to the destination. The car was gorgeous too, with its smooth fiberglass body and distinctive side strakes that looked like gills. It was low, sleek, and looked fast just sitting still. The name Bagheera came from the panther in the Jungle Book, and like its namesake, this car was all about smooth, feline grace, with just a hint of wildness. Sure, parking was a challenge because the car was wider than it looked, and getting 3 people out simultaneously could look like a choreographed dance routine. But the Bagheera proved that sometimes weird ideas work beautifully. It was different, it was French, and it made every grocery run feel like a group adventure. Matra Rancho. Speaking of French innovation, the Matra Rancho was like someone took a regular car and gave it platform boots. This wasn't quite an SUV and definitely wasn't a truck. It was something entirely new. The Rancho sat high off the ground with plastic fender flares, looking like a mole crawler, before mole crawling was even a thing. The best part? It was front-wheel drive, which meant the high seating position was all about style, not substance. You sat up high, like you were commanding a mighty off-road beast, then remembered you were basically driving a dressed-up family car. But that didn't matter. The Rancho had adventure written all over its plastic-clad body. Inside, it was pure 70s excess. Velour seats that felt like a hug, wood grain dashboard that screamed sophistication, and enough chrome to blind small aircraft. The Rancho let you feel rugged without getting your hands dirty, which was perfect for suburbanites who wanted to cosplay as outdoorsy types. It may have been more show than go, but the Rancho pioneered the idea that cars could be about image as much as function. In a decade when people were figuring out who they wanted to be, the Rancho said, "Be someone who looks adventurous while still making it to the office on time." Barned Bug. The Barned Bug wasn't just a car. It was a science experiment that someone decided to put wheels on. This 3-wheeled orange wedge looked like a slice of automotive cheddar that had gained sentience and learned to move. Picture this: a bright orange fiberglass triangle with wheels. That's basically what the Barned Bug was. The entire top hinged forward like a jet fighter, so getting in felt like you were preparing for takeoff. Once inside, if you could call that cramped cockpit inside, you shared space with a passenger like you were both ingredients in a very tight recipe. The Barned Bug came in one color, day-glow orange. That's it. If you wanted subtlety, you bought something else. This wasn't transportation. This was a statement. It said, "I'm here, I'm weird, and I'm not apologizing for either of those things." Driving one felt like piloting a very slow UFO. 2 wheels in front, 1 in back, and enough attitude to make bigger cars get out of the way, mostly out of confusion. The Barned Bug proved that sometimes the best way to be strange was to be so strange that people just had to respect your commitment to weirdness. McLaren M6GT. The McLaren M6GT was what happened when a Formula One team decided to make a road car. This wasn't adaptation. This was pure translation of track technology to the street, and the result was gloriously uncompromising. Only about 12 M6GTs were ever built, making it rarer than most supercars today. The car looked like it had been carved from a single piece of metal by someone who'd never seen a road car before. The gull-wing doors were the only normal thing about it, and even those seemed like an afterthought. Everything about the M6GT whispered, or roared, race car. The driving position was reclined like you were piloting a fighter jet. The steering wheel was tiny like a toy, and the throttle response was immediate, like your thoughts were directly connected to the engine. In the 1970s, seeing an M6GT was like spotting a celebrity. Rare, exciting, and you definitely called your friends about it later. These cars proved that sometimes the strangest ideas come from taking something that works perfectly in one environment and stubbornly refusing to change it for another. The M6GT was a race car that just happened to have a license plate, and that's exactly what made it magical. Vector W2 prototype. The Vector W2 wasn't just a car, it was a spaceship that forgot how to fly. Gerald Wiegert, Vector's founder, wasn't interested in making another sports car. He wanted to build something that looked like it could time travel. The W2 prototype was all angles and aggression, like someone had drawn a stealth fighter on a napkin and decided to make it road legal. The wedge shape was so extreme that the front end practically scraped the ground, and the rear spoiler looked like it could generate its own weather system. Inside, the Vector was all business, with an aircraft-inspired cockpit that made you feel like you needed a pilot's license. Digital displays, revolutionary for the time, glowed like a spaceship control panel, and every switch looked like it could launch missiles or at least open a really aggressive can of soda. The Vector attracted attention like a magnet in a paperclip factory. People didn't just look, they stared, pointed, and had debates about whether it was from the future or another planet. The W2 was proof that sometimes the best way to be memorable was to be absolutely, categorically unlike anything else on the road. Lamborghini Marzal. The Lamborghini Marzal wasn't just a car, it was a crystal palace on wheels. With more glass than a greenhouse, this worn-off Lambo made the Pacer look conservative. The entire body was essentially a frame holding pieces of glass together, like someone had built a car out of a jewelry display case. Those gull-wing doors weren't just for show. They were necessary because the car had no roof or conventional pillars. Getting in felt like stepping into a transparent spaceship. Once inside, you were on display for the entire world, which was perfect if you were a celebrity, but slightly terrifying if you were just trying to grab groceries. The Marzal had a 6-cylinder engine instead of Lamborghini's traditional V12, which made it weird even by Lamborghini standards. It sounded different, looked different, and drove different. The silver finishing glass panels reflected light like a disco ball, creating a mobile light show everywhere it went. In the 70s, the Marzal made appearances at car shows and special events, causing crowds to form wherever it stopped. It was proof that Lamborghini wasn't just about building fast cars. They were about building dreams, even if those dreams were completely transparent. Literally. Still with us? We're halfway through the wildest collection of automotive oddities the 70s had to offer. If these stories are fueling your nostalgia tank, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more groovy rides down memory lane. Lotus Esprit Series 1. The Lotus Esprit looked like it had been drawn with a ruler and a very aggressive attitude. This wasn't just a sports car. It was a geometric statement that happened to have an engine. The wedge shape was so extreme that the car looked like a doorstop that had learned to move. Giugiaro's design was all about straight lines and sharp angles. No curves, no compromises, just pure automotive origami. The car was so low that getting in required a specific technique that yoga instructors would envy, and getting out looked like performance art. But here's the magic. The Esprit looked fast even when it was parked. Those triangular side windows and the aggressive front spoiler made it look like it was always about to pounce. The rear end was basically a wall with taillights, and the whole car had the stance of an angry cat. The Esprit became famous when it could go underwater in a James Bond movie, which was perfect because the car already looked like it came from the future. In real life, most Esprits stayed on dry land, but they still turned heads like they had secret agent powers. The Esprit proved that sometimes being strange wasn't about being weird. It was about being so ahead of your time that everyone else looked ordinary. TVR 3000M. The TVR 3000M was like a British sports car that had been hitting the gym. This wasn't refined elegance. This was muscular, raw, and slightly unhinged. TVR had taken their traditional sports car formula and added enough steroids to make it genuinely intimidating. The 3000 meters had the stance of a sprinter in the starting blocks, all tension and barely contained energy. Those bulging fenders weren't for show. They housed proper racing-bred suspension that meant business. The hood scoop looked like the car was taking a deep breath before unleashing holy hell on the nearest racetrack. Inside, the 3000M was all business, with gauges everywhere and switches that felt like they controlled important things. The steering wheel was so big, you could use it as a dinner plate, and the shifter felt like it was connected directly to the drivetrain, with no filters or apologies. TVR didn't believe in making things easy. Want air conditioning? Figure it out yourself. Power steering? Who needs it? The 3000M was a car for purists who thought other sports cars had gone soft. It demanded respect, skill, and probably a chiropractor on speed dial. But those who could handle it felt like they were taming a beautifully engineered beast that just happened to be legal on public roads. Monteverdi Hai 450 SS. The Monteverdi Hai 450 SS looked like someone had taken a race car and forgotten to remove the street-legal stickers. This Swiss supercar was so low, it could probably limbo under a coffee table, and so aggressive, it made other sports cars look like shopping carts. Only 2 were ever built, which meant seeing one was like witnessing a unicorn that could do 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. The Hai, German for shark, lived up to its name. It was all predatory lines and barely contained violence, like a great white that had learned to use roads. The doors opened conventionally, which was almost disappointing given how exotic everything else was. But once you managed to fold yourself into the cockpit, you realized this was serious business. The steering wheel looked like it came from a fighter jet, and the view out was basically just hood and horizon. The Hai was proof that you didn't need to be Italian to build a stunning supercar. You just needed vision, craftsmanship, and the willingness to create something that would make people question reality. In the 70s, when these rarely appeared at car shows, they attracted crowds like celebrity sightings. The Hai wasn't just rare, it was practically mythical. Ferrari 512 S Modulo. The Ferrari 512 S Modulo wasn't just a concept car. It was a conversation starter with the future. Pininfarina had created something that looked like it had been designed by aliens who had only heard cars described secondhand. This wasn't evolution. This was revolution on wheels. The Modulo had no doors. Instead, the entire front section of the car hinged forward, like the nose cone of a spacecraft. Getting in required climbing over the sill like you were boarding a very low aircraft. Once inside, you sat behind a windshield that could have doubled as a fighter jet's canopy. Everything about the Modulo was extreme. The triangle wheels looked like they belonged on a space station, the side profile was basically a straight line, and the rear spoiler seemed large enough to generate actual downforce at parking lot speeds. It was painted in a color that could only be described as future silver. The Modulo made appearances at auto shows throughout the 70s, where it consistently blew minds and redefined what people thought a car could look like. It wasn't just transportation. It was a philosophical statement about the future of automotive design. Even today, the Modulo looks like it's from about 30 years in the future, which means in the 70s, it must have seemed like pure magic. Lamborghini Countach Series 1. The Lamborghini Countach wasn't just a sports car, it was a manifesto written in metal and fiberglass. When it debuted, it didn't just turn heads, It gave people whiplash. This wasn't refinement. This was automotive punk rock, loud, aggressive, and completely uncompromising. Those scissor doors weren't just functional, they were theatrical. Opening them felt like unveiling a work of art, and the sound they made was part of the experience. The car sat so low that you practically had to pour yourself into the driver's seat. And once inside, the view through those tiny windows felt like peering through mail slots. The Countach was wide, like really wide. It barely fit in parking spaces and made normal cars look positively dainty. The rear spoiler wasn't just big, it was architectural, like someone had attached a coffee table to the back of the car. And those air scoops? They weren't subtle suggestions. They were demands for attention. In the mid-70s, seeing a Countach was like witnessing a celebrity sighting. Kids would line up just to hear it start, and that V12 engine didn't disappoint. It roared like a mechanical dinosaur, and watching it drive away was like seeing a piece of the future disappear into the distance. BMW Turbo Concept. The BMW Turbo wasn't just ahead of its time. It was from an entirely different timeline. This concept car looked like BMW's designers had been given cocaine and a sketch pad, then told to design the future. The result was a spaceship that someone had cleverly disguised as a car. Those gull-wing doors weren't BMW's only dramatic touch. The car had a front end that looked like it could slice through air molecules, and the rear was so aerodynamic, it seemed to create its own weather patterns. The orange and silver paint job wasn't just striking, it was practically radioactive. Inside, the BMW Turbo was all business, with a cockpit that looked like mission control for a very stylish spacecraft. The seats were more like pilot chairs, and the dashboard had enough gauges and switches to intimidate a professional pilot. Even the steering wheel looked like it could control more than just the front wheels. The Turbo influenced real BMW designs for decades, proving that sometimes the strangest concepts contain the seeds of future production cars. In auto shows throughout the 70s, it made people believe that by 1980, we'd all be driving cars that looked like this. We weren't, but the dream was beautiful. Lancia 037 Stratos HF. The Lancia 037 Stratos HF wasn't built for the road, it was built for winning, and occasionally, it graciously accepted being driven on public streets. This wasn't just a rally car with license plates. It was a rally car that had reluctantly agreed to play by road rules. Everything about the Stratos HF was compromised for speed. The interior had about as much creature comfort as a fighter jet. The noise levels made conversation impossible above idle, and the ride quality suggested that the designers had confused suspension with suggestion. But my God, was it beautiful! The bodywork wasn't just functional, it was sculpture. Every vent, every line, every curve had a purpose, and that purpose was usually go faster or look absolutely incredible. The rear spoiler wasn't decoration. It was a wing that happened to be attached to a very fast car-shaped aircraft. Driving a Stratos HF on the road was like bringing a Formula One car to a grocery run. Technically possible, but everyone knew it was designed for something more serious. In the 70s, seeing one meant you were either at a rally or witnessing someone with very serious driving credentials doing their shopping in style. Getting close to the end of our list. If these amazing machines are bringing back memories or teaching you something new, smash that like button and subscribe. We're about to reveal the absolute strangest car that shocked the world in the 1970s. Colani Columbia. The Colani Columbia wasn't just strange, it was alien. Luigi Colani had created something that looked like it had been designed by a civilization that had evolved past the need for traditional wheels. This wasn't a car, it was a mobile sculpture that happened to transport people. The Columbia had no sharp edges, no straight lines, and no apologies. Everything was curved, organic, and flowing like it had been grown rather than built. The front end spiraled into a cone, the sides flowed like water, and the rear just trailed off like the car hadn't quite figured out how to end. There were no conventional doors. Instead, the entire front section hinged up like a beetle opening its shell. Getting inside required contortion skills that would impress a circus performer. And once you were in, the interior continued the theme of, what if cars were made by beings who had never seen a traditional car? The Colani Columbia made appearances at European auto shows where it consistently broke people's brains. It was proof that sometimes being strange wasn't about being different. It was about reimagining everything from scratch. The Columbia didn't just challenge automotive design. It dared to ask whether cars needed to be car-shaped at all. And there you have it. 20 cars that didn't just think outside the box. They redesigned the box, painted it orange, and gave it gull-wing doors. The 1970s were a wild time for car design, when anything seemed possible and sanity was optional. These weren't just vehicles. They were statements, dreams, and sometimes delightful disasters on wheels. They proved that sometimes the best way to move forward was to ignore every rule, question every assumption, and ask, what if our car looked like it came from Mars? Which of these strange machines would you love to take for a spin? Did we miss any beautifully bizarre vehicles from the decade of automotive experimentation? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear about your favorite weird wheels. And if this trip through automotive weirdness brought back memories or opened your eyes to the gloriously strange world of 70s car design, don't forget to subscribe. Because when it comes to nostalgia, we're just getting warmed up, and there are so many more wild rides to explore together. Until next time, keep those memories alive. And remember, sometimes the best way to get somewhere is to take the strangest possible route.